you're a product to a certain point and you keep pushing the boundaries of the threat model.
It's not enough to say, I checked all the boxes that are here. I have this certification, I have that degree. Well, so do 50,000 plus other people.
I looked at them and it was, it opened the door to a new world to me.
The idea was to build a community around it, to foster an idea that will outlast me.
I say go with your dreams, if you want to do 2 things, if you want to do 3 things, if you want to do everything professionally, you can. You should just try it.
Solid experience and a background that, when I went back out into industry was, frankly attractive.
Welcome to Hack Chat. My name is Marco Figueroa, and today we have a special guest. Today we have Tia Hopkins. She is a cybersecurity exec. 2020 top 100 women in cyber, top 25 women leaders in cyber, 2019 SC Media Outstanding Educator. I am super excited. Tia, welcome to Hack Chat. Can you tell me a little, tell the users, give them a little bit of your background. We're going to go deep into it, but just the Cliff Notes version.
Yeah, Cliff Notes version. I've always been kind of into technology, but not to date myself. I never really knew what that meant in terms of pursuing it as a career. But I started working for the phone company that led to an IT role, systems, network administration, moved into leadership as an IT director, and then decided I wanted to focus on something. I was a generalist, and long story short, did some market research and landed on cybersecurity. Best decision ever. It just speaks to the way my mind works, the way I like to work, and the things I like to do. So I love it.
Nice. I mean, for me, your background is very impressive, right? We spoke before this interview and we were just catching up, chit-chatting, and you said you wasted time by dropping out of college 4 times. Now you have 3 degrees and working on your 4th. Please go into depth about wasting time and dropping out, and what was your hesitation? It seems like you were double dutching.
Yeah. I don't know that it was hesitation. I told myself I wanted to go to college, but I think the reason for the dropouts is that I was going for the wrong reasons. I didn't really understand my why, didn't really know what my desired outcomes were once I got out. When I was growing up, you go to school, you get good grades, you graduate high school, you go to college, and that's the rules. And that's why I went to college. But part of that also was I went to University of Miami. That was my first time dropping out, and I took computer engineering because people said, you're good with computers. You should do something with computers. And I said, okay. And so then I got there, and what I realized is that I'm not an engineer at heart. It wasn't that I didn't understand the concepts. It's just not what I wanted to be doing every day. I'm more of a technologist. And so that was dropout number 1. But I kept trying to go back. And it was a combination of finances, time, wrong program that led to the other 3. And then one day I grew up and said, I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do it for myself. I'm not going to do it because I'm looking at job descriptions and it says I need to have it. I'm going to do it because it's something that I want to do for me. And that was my drive. But once I started and I finished my bachelor's degree, some success after all those failures, it was like, whoa, this is cool. So I got my bachelor's. I went straight into my first master's, straight into my second master's, and got a bunch of certifications along the way. And funny, people tease me and say, you must be addicted to school. I'm like, no, actually, I'm addicted to knowledge. I rather kind of dislike the process, but I love the outcome. So now I'm pursuing my PhD as well.
What was your first degree in bachelor's? Computer science, cybersecurity?
Information technology.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. When did you begin to understand, okay, I have that hacker mentality I want to go into the cybersecurity realm?
Yeah. I've always been the type of person where I'm like, well, if somebody can build that, I can break it.
A tinkerer.
Yeah, tinker, or I can make it better. And I know it was intended for this use, but I'm going to use it for that. or that costs too much. I'll just build my own. And when I got to a point that I wanted to specialize, I actually did some market research, and my options appeared to be DevOps, cloud, and cybersecurity. And DevOps was out because I just wasn't, into that. I'm not a coder, not really wanting to do that type of thing. And cloud was too new. I didn't feel like I could drive enough value, and it wasn't the best use of my transferable skills. And the more I looked into cybersecurity, I mean, obviously it was speaking to me, like I said earlier, but I felt like I was doing a lot of the things that someone in a cybersecurity role would do. It was just a function of the role I was performing, not the focus. And so it just made sense to transition into that. And I started out as like a systems engineer, where I was deploying cybersecurity technologies, and then that led into more of a pre-sales consultative role, and that's actually what I do today in leadership, as I lead the pre-sales solutions architecture team at Eastern Tire.
Nice. And you said you had 2 more degrees, 2 masters. What
Yeah.
are they in?
Funny story. First one is master's in information security and assurance.
Okay.
And I was at Kaplan before it became Purdue Global when I was doing that. And right before I graduated, I don't know why I was looking at the course catalog. I was just looking through it. And I saw my program, and then I saw master's in cybersecurity. And I was like, well, if they're both here, then they're different. So why are they different? And why don't I have this? And why didn't they tell me I could have switched to that? So I got all annoyed. And then I did some research and felt like I wanted to get the cybersecurity degree. Not that I needed it, I wanted to. Yeah. And so I ended up not doing it at Kaplan. I switched to Western Governors for that. And I just like that format because it's competency-based. Like I said, it wasn't a degree that I needed. And it turns out the programs weren't much different, but that was just a master's in cybersecurity and information assurance.
You wanted that extra feather in your cap.
Yeah, like, am I missing something? Like, it's 2 programs. There's got to be something in one that's not in the other, right?
How long did it take you for that? Because I want to go into the process. It seems like you have a lot of hustle and grit there, and I want to go into that. How long did it take you to get both masters, or just when you swapped over to Governor's Union? How long did that take you?
I think probably 2 years for the second one. And that was just a matter of, like, I was progressing in my career. I was responsible for more. I was working on certifications too. So it was really more timing than anything. I think someone that is solely focused on that program could get through it in probably a year, year and a half, especially if you already have industry experience. I think the first master's took me just under 2 years, maybe like a year and 8 months.
One of the things that I love about doing this is I get to speak to people like you, and I have this curiosity of learning, right? One of the things that I love to hear from people is, how do you tackle new content? So you have 2 bachelors, 1 bachelor, 2 masters, and certifications, right? It's a lot of material to grasp, to really take in. What is the process for you to study? Like, if you're taking a course or a certification, what does that process look like for you?
I do most things in life by beginning with the end in mind. So if I'm doing this thing, why am I doing it? At the end of the day, what do they want to see from me? Or what box do they want to check? What is it that I need to do? And that allows me to focus on what's important, right? Because if you're telling me that I need to go off and read a 600-page book, but the assignment you give me looks like it's focused on about 250 of those pages, that's where I'm going to heavily focus. And then I'll just make sure I touch on the other content, right? So I don't waste my money and my education. I want to make sure I get the knowledge. But the reality is, it's figuring out what works for you as a learner, right? We are given a syllabus. We are given the objectives of the courses that we take. We're given the content that we need to read, the assignments that we need to produce. But that doesn't mean you have to follow it in that manner. As long as you produce the desired outcome, you get there how you get there. Like, I've never been able to really sit down and read a book cover to cover. I can count on one hand the number of books I've read cover to cover in my lifetime. I never knew why that was, I just thought there was something weird going up here, that one minute I'd be reading about network security, and next thing I'm thinking about monkeys and beach balls, and have to go back and read everything all over again. But I learned last year that I actually have ADHD. Answer, hello. That's what's been going on. But luckily, long before that, I just made the decision that I'm going to learn the way I need to learn. So if you're telling me by the end of this section of the course I should be able to do these things, well, I'm going to go off and facilitate that learning, whether that's videos or books or online tests, whatever that is. I think there's something to be said about not taking things at face value. Nothing has to be the way it is, and just make sure it's working for you. And that's what helped me be successful once I figured that out, of course.
Nice. That's really good. It seems you have a passion for teaching. How did you get into teaching and becoming a professor?
I think what made me want to teach was my own experience as a student, and being from the perspective of a professional, and going through this program and saying, okay, based on what I learned here, would I be able to do what I am doing today with what I learned? And a lot of times the answer I gave myself was no. And I'll just be fully transparent. I think there's some issues in academia. We're doing a lot to maybe prepare individuals for the cybersecurity industry and understanding what they might come across and what terminology means. But I think we could stand to do a bit better in terms of preparing individuals for jobs. Studying for a certification and passing an exam does not mean I'm going to be able to walk into a job interview and tell a hiring manager how I'm going to be able to drive value in their organization, or how I'm going to help them enable the business by introducing security policies and things like that. You know, there's that applied piece of it that's missing in some programs. And so that's what drove me to want to teach. And then I was presented with an opportunity to do so and be flexible in the way that I did it. I wasn't like tied to this content this way. I don't really work well in environments like that. I need room to breathe. And so, you know, when I teach, I tell my students, yeah, you're going to have reading assignments, but I'm not here to regurgitate that stuff for you. I'm here to get you curious and tell you how it works in the real world, and how the real world is either just like what the book said or nothing like what the book said. So you can have those discussions.
For me, I loved everything you said right there, because a lot of times what papers do, certifications, degrees, it brings you to the door, right, of the company or job that you want. But until you have those skill sets and you prove that you have those skill sets, it's like, it doesn't matter if you have those papers, right?
Right.
It's like you said, that applied knowledge. And I always am fascinated, like with people that's like, hey, you know, I have this paper certification. You know, it's like, do you understand every part that you need to? This is why I love like certifications like OSCP from our offensive security, because
Yes.
it's a 24-hour based exam, like hands-on keyboard. Regardless of people like it or not, you know that people that have that certification potentially have the skills that you're looking for in that. So I really love that. What courses do you teach?
I teach network, data, and communication security as part of a master's in cybersecurity program at Yeshiva University.
Nice. And what interests me is what I want to know is, how do you prep for like your course line when you're teaching, you know, a specific course? I love teaching, but I have never taught an ongoing course, right? It might have been like a 4-day training, or, you know, I might have written a course that, you know, you can do whenever you want, but I've never been, you know, constantly, you know, teaching 2 or 3 courses and on the road or in a university. So how do you prep for, you know, that outline? Is there a specific book you use and you just outline it, and you know, you take your experience and create the outline?
Yeah, so I have an outline, so to speak. Like, there's the course description, because of course the university is accredited, and there's certain things that the courses have to deliver on. So my first thing is, all right, what do I need to teach to make sure I'm achieving what the school is saying we're going to help students achieve? But that's in a book. right? I could just assign 6 or 7 chapters to read and boom, now you know about disaster recovery. Now you know about secure coding. So I take that a step further and ask myself, how do I address learners with different learning styles, right? So it's not all reading a book. Maybe there's videos that go along with it. I love labs because doing a lab helps you understand what you've read. And I also encourage my students to do the lab multiple times, because I think when we do a lab, we're following along to make sure we check all the boxes. If you go through it again, it's okay, now I know where I got to go. Now I'm paying a bit more attention to what I'm actually doing. And then you do it a third time to say, okay, would I be able to do this without the instructions? And that's how you know you really learn. So the applied aspect of it. But the big thing for me, I think the differentiator, I like to say for myself as a professor, the biggest thing for me is how can I add value to what this student is going to add to the industry. You know, they need to leave my class with more than just what was in the book, more than just talking about the labs that they walk through. So I'm bringing industry knowledge to my students, and that's actually a differentiator for Yeshiva. All of the professors are practitioners, and that's nothing against, you know, professors that are researchers, but they're just different lenses, right, on the material. So for me, it is, what do they need to get? What can I add to that? How do I make it interesting? And how do I make sure I'm addressing all different learning styles?
Nice. Do you still have the passion for teaching?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I love when, you know, students come in and, you know, they freak out because they think I'm going to be a tough professor because I'm very clear on my expectations and I'm here for this, I'm not here for that. And then as we go through the semester, they realize why I am the way I am, because it doesn't do them any favors to just throw material and assignments out there just for the heck of it. It doesn't do anything for them. It doesn't do anything to move our industry forward. And it doesn't do anything for the credibility of these degree programs, right? Because if hiring managers talk to 10 candidates that say they have a master's in cybersecurity and none of those candidates can carry a conversation about mitigating risk in their organization, they might stop looking at individuals that have a master's and take a different approach, right? So we need to make sure that, you know, degrees and certifications remain credible. And that comes in, you know, making sure the individuals pursuing these things have that applied knowledge, can facilitate the discussions, and actually are learning to learn and not learning to remember.
Nice. What would you recommend for someone breaking into cybersecurity?
Very first thing is make sure you're doing it for the right reasons. Understand what that reason is, right? If you're pursuing cybersecurity because someone told you it was a lucrative career, or it's cool, or it's what's happening and it's where all the jobs are, that's not enough. You know, you need to do more research. Understand what it means to be, you know, fighting the good fight in this industry, and it never being enough to just get a certification and be done. You know, you're always having to learn, always having to keep up. The minute we think we solve a problem on the good side, the bad side figures out a way to give us a headache again. And understanding what role you'll play in that bigger picture, and you as a person, does that fit? Once you decide, okay, yes, this is something that I want to do, I think it's important to understand the industry at large, like I would say enterprise architecture in general. So all the things organizations care about, all the things maybe a healthcare system would care about, and figure out where you want to fit into that and what that means, because that's what tells you what education to pursue. And I find when folks ask that question, how do I break in? A lot of times the answer they're looking for is, which certifications do I pursue? Or is it a certification or a degree? Well, I don't have an answer for that until you tell me what you want to do with your career. Because if someone tells me they want to be a compliance officer, well, I'm definitely not going to tell them to go get the CEH or the OSCP, right? It's very different.
That's definitely true. I mean, for me, I always tell people, don't chase the money, chase the skill. The money will follow always. Yep. When you become an expert, the money will be there in whatever you pick. And the thing is, trusting that process, that every day you're going to get better. And I'm a constant learner. I am always learning every single day. And that's when I go to sleep, is like, am I better than yesterday's Marco? I always say the same thing. And we're all, you know, we're all mental athletes, and we are hustling all day. You know, I know you and we sit down 8 hours at least a day, where hopefully, you know, we get some exercise during the day in some way, but we're constantly moving, right? I find that hustle and grit is the key to getting better in this industry.
Yeah,
What would
absolutely.
you recommend people pertaining to excelling in this industry, not only breaking in, but while they're in the industry, taking it to that next level?
It really is about understanding what it is about you that differentiates you from the competition. If we're speaking in the context of jobs and landing a role and being able to grow and, you know, accelerate your career and be successful, and then honing those skills, right? If your claim to fame you feel is that you're a critical thinker and an amazing problem solver, make sure your portfolio supports that, right?
Mm.
Make sure you've done projects where you've got use cases that demonstrate your ability to do that, and that you've got stories to tell in your interviews that demonstrate your ability to do that. It's not enough to say, I checked all the boxes that are here. I have this certification, I have that degree. Well, so do 50,000 plus other people. What is different about you? And that's what you lean into. And it takes a while to figure that out. You can't just wake up one day, get a job and say, all right, I'm different because I blah, 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 and I'm going to go do that thing. It takes time. It takes time. But while you're taking time to figure that out, that's when you're building the skills so that when you get to the point where you're going to break out and crush it, all that other stuff you learned is just table stakes. You don't even have to talk about it.
I completely agree. When I first got into the industry, the first thing I said was like, I got my foot, in the door. Now I'm just going to crush every door and try to outwork everyone just to get better, just outwork myself constantly. What were some of the difficulties you faced during your rise in the industry?
That's always a tough question for me to answer because I'm hard-headed, honestly. I have super thick skin. I learned at a very young age to not need validation. So things may have come my way, but I'm very selective about what I consider and move on from versus allow to actually penetrate me and change the way I feel about myself or what I'm doing. And I tell myself all the time, don't let what people or your situation put on you distract you from what's in you. Right. And that's what I live by, because what's in you, it's in you. It's always been in you. It always will be in you. That's your superpower. So don't let all that external stuff take away from that. But I'll tell you some of the things that I've noticed, as a woman of color, a tattooed woman of color, a masculine of center, tattooed woman of color. When I walk into a room, and this hasn't happened recently, but I would say early in my career, when I would walk into a room, I would have to establish credibility. And I would see myself in the process establishing credibility, but I would notice with my male counterparts that they had credibility when they walked in the room. And so that created, I think, this, what I like to call inverse imposter syndrome, where it's not, should I be here? Like, am I qualified for this role? It's, no, I've got all the things. I know what I'm talking about. You see what I did? You want to work with me. You want to work with me. And that's what it drove me toward. There's a book, So Good They Can't Ignore You. And that's what I live by. You just push and push to just be the best. To your point, beat out the competition and shine. And that's just how I live. And I think that's why I wasn't super impacted by the things that did happen while I was growing in my career.
How did you overcome? It's very good, that you mentioned that, because how do you overcome those first few interactions where you have to build the credibility? I know sometimes potentially it could get tiring. You move over to another job and it's like, I got to do the same thing over and over again. What are those first few steps in there to establish yourself?
Self-awareness, as cheesy as it might sound, is really important. You have to know who you are, what you stand for, what you're capable of, and why you're doing what you're doing. And you have to remind yourself of that, because it gets hard. You have to have what I like to call your safe house or your center or your baseline that you bring yourself back to when you have those imposter syndrome moments where you're asking yourself, gosh, are they right? Like, do I really not know what I'm doing? And it'll happen, but you have to address it for what it is. It's just a moment. I'm human. I have feelings, and you move on from it because you remind yourself of who you are and you stand in that power and you just keep moving forward. Because and that, to my point of consideration versus penetration, if you allow that negative energy to continue to penetrate you, it just gets heavy. And it's hard enough to wake up in the morning and do the things you got to do just because you're you. And then to have that compounded by things that other people think that have no idea of what your story is, where you're coming from, and what your struggle is, and what it took you to get to where you are. Like, don't let that mess with you.
Do you find, you know, you're in a different position, right? As a cybersecurity exec now, do you find yourself still having to do some of those things, or do you let your title speak for yourself?
It's funny because that title is it's a double-edged sword, right? Because you see the title and it's like, oh, I want to talk to that person. But then sometimes you see the title and then you see me and it's like, really? So then it's like, oh, I can't wait to see, what she has to say. And it's not super obvious, but if I kind of look around and I see the kind of question marks go to, she does know what she's talking about. And then those turn into nods. It's not as much as it used to be, but it does still exist because I don't fit a mold. I think I am who I am. And so maybe people don't know what to expect, and that's okay because they shouldn't.
Nice. I mean, for me, I read this book. I was trying to find it while you were talking. I know it's Convince Someone in 60 Seconds. I want to say it's that book, but I read this book and it completely changed the way I looked at initial interactions and initial, when you first meet someone. So I clearly remember in this book, and I read it, I would say 10 years ago, and I still remember there was a Harvard paper that was published on how people judge you initially.
Mm-hmm.
And what they said was that in less than 1 second, they already have judged you. It's just by default, like they already have a judgment of you. And what he writes in his book is, what I do is I am very professional from the waist up and very clownish from the waist down. So he would get in his blazer, his white collar, and then he would have jeans and like clown red shoes, but not literally clown, like nice red shoes, which would throw people off. And then what he was saying was that it gave that perception that I'm approachable, but I'm still a bit like business. And I would recommend, I'm going to find that book, but I'm going to recommend that on the next time I get on and I have a conversation that kind of pops up. I would highly recommend people to look at that, not only that, but read the Harvard paper on it's just by default. People don't want to judge, but it just happens, right? And that's what the paper was about. And it's interesting, ever since then, that changed the way I looked at how I present myself to the world. And for me, it has opened doors, and it also has changed the way I look because I understand, what the paper's about and also what this gentleman said. So it's really interesting when you're talking about perception and what people look at. And like you said, you want to make that good impression, and you don't want people to go ahead and judge you. You want to be judged on how smart you are and the work that you put out. So, let me ask you, how can people overcome the struggles that you may have had in cybersecurity?
First off, like you have to be able to back up what you're putting out there, right? So if your resume says you're all these things, you have to be able to back that up. Otherwise, you're going to ruin it for yourself and maybe folks that come after you, right? So I might not make a lot of friends when I say this, but don't become a paper professional. Don't just go get all the certifications and all the degrees and say you made it and then, can't really deliver, when it comes time to do the work. So that's thing one. But if you're there, it really is like all things I do is risk versus reward. And I think an example of that is my tattoos. And, there's this constant internal struggle of, should they even be looking at my tattoos? Like, it's just, it is what it is. It doesn't change the fact that I know what I know, and I'm here to talk about what I'm here to talk about. But I have to ask myself the question, is it about me in this moment? Am I here to establish credibility for my business? Or is it more important to me in this moment that I get to be exactly who I am unapologetically? And so if I am myself, what is the risk to myself? What's the risk to the company? What's the risk to my reputation? So those are things that I consider when making a decision how I want to approach a situation of adversity, because it's not as black and white as folks might think. And it does come with I think a level of emotional intelligence, understanding the audience and what you're there to do, and choosing to accept that or not accept it, and then owning that, right? But really understanding the situation that you're in, and if you're in it and you've accepted that you're in it, knowing what it is, remind yourself of that, because now you have to get through it.
Yeah. What is the one thing that has made you a better cybersecurity professional?
That mental athlete attitude. I had a football coach that said to me one day, we were practicing this drill and I just could not get it. It was really pissing me off. And I finally got it and I got so excited and I looked at him for that smile of approval and he just looked at me deadpan and said, don't just do it till you get it right. Do it till you can't get it wrong. And I took that with me. This was years ago, and I take it with me everywhere. I apply it to life, my marriage, to cybersecurity. And I think that attitude has propelled me to being where I am today, because it's not that it's never enough. It's just understanding that there will likely always be something else. And in order to stay ahead, you have to do what you have to do so you don't fall behind.
That was powerful right there. That is amazing. With all of your accolades, you must have a line of people that want you to mentor them. What does it take for you to mentor someone?
I think my success as a mentor heavily relies on the needs of the mentee. If I had to categorize where I thought I'm better at helping individuals out, it's how to I would say carve a path toward a destination that they've determined. They know what they want. They just kind of need some guidance, someone to bounce ideas off of, and maybe someone to push them to think about things they haven't thought about and push them to pursue things that they may be afraid of. I find that I am less effective when a mentee really doesn't know where they want to go, what they want to do, because it almost feels like I'm there trying to help them figure that out. And it's not like I know I want to be a cybersecurity professional, but I can't decide if I want to pursue a red team or blue team. It's not that. It's like, I want to be in cybersecurity. I'm like, okay, what else? Well, I don't know. I want to be in cybersecurity. So, my message is the more specific you are with the need, the better I think a mentor is able to be. And I'm all about what's real. I don't sugarcoat anything. I think there's something to be said about being transparent. And, I talk about my failures. I think those are much more important than my success, and being honest with how this industry really is and the things that can be expected, because it's not all sunshine and rainbows. It's hard days, it's long nights, it's being underappreciated. And when I have the opportunity to talk about some of that adversity, I absolutely do, because folks need to understand what they're getting themselves into. So those are some of the things that I focus on.
That's awesome. You're a better mentor than I am. The first thing I do is I just drop 4 books on people and be like, after you read this, then come back to me. And I got a 95% dropout rate.
Wow. I would have dropped out.
Yeah, the books, it's my like some of my favorite books, Yeah. But again, it's hard to read these books, right? Yeah. It's all about improving yourself, like the art of learning, and how to master yourself, and like learning, like just learning how to learn. Yeah. And that's, for me, that's something that's important. Like if you can't like go through all these 4 books, the industry is going to eat you alive, because you're constantly learning, constantly reading, and it's a lot of it is self-improvement, right? Mm-hmm. The industry is always changing and making all of these moves every year. And it's like, you're reading, at least for me, I want to say I'm 10% of like my day is ingesting something, reading something, analyzing it, and then like doing some research and reading more. So it's another thing I recommend people to take speed reading courses. I'm like, look, you want to take a speed reading course, and that's what I recommend. There's so many out there. I definitely would recommend for everyone out there, Jim Quick. Go take all of his courses on, he's a master of remembering things and using memory palaces and speed reading course. I would highly recommend that. A lot of movie stars, hire him to help those movie actors and actresses remember lines easier. So he wrote a book. He has courses out there. I would highly recommend for anyone in our industry to take his courses. You created a nonprofit. Can you go into that, and how did you come up with the idea?
Sure. I mean, it's along the lines of mentorship. I think, the way I approach mentorship is understanding the individual. What are your desired outcomes? Like, what do you want to do, and why do you want to do it? Those are the things you're gonna have to remind yourself of. Like I said, when things get hard. But I started the nonprofit because I'm one person, and I'm one person with. I mean, I've done a lot of things. I've seen a lot of things. I feel like it can add a lot of value, but I'm still one person, and my knowledge is finite. My experience is limited. And no matter how emotionally intelligent I try to be, I have implicit biases, right? So I wanted to open that up. But what made me really passionate about starting the organization is that we need to diversify the cybersecurity talent pipeline. It absolutely needs to be more diverse because our adversaries are diverse. So if we're going to be able to keep up, we have to be diverse as well. And lack of representation is a really big deal in cybersecurity space. So as a woman of color, if I'm thinking I want to pursue a career in cybersecurity, I don't see anybody that looks like me. I don't have a technical background. Everybody's telling me I have to be this master coder and I have to be super technical. I'm probably going to walk away. So I created Empower Cybersecurity to basically be a safe space for women of color interested in a career in cybersecurity or already in the field and trying to further their career, just to have a safe space to figure it out. Here's where you come to fail, bounce ideas off of someone that looks like you, that has been where you're trying to go, and can share their experiences with you. Of course, there's all the table stakes things like study groups, webinars, mentorship. We have programs focused on professional development, technical development, etc. But the idea is to address the entire woman, because sure, representation is part of it. Confidence is another part of it. One of my favorite sayings is that confidence has no competition. When you're confident, you say something with confidence, you could be dead wrong and people will believe you. And I think that a lot of times individuals that are confident are perceived to be competent. And sometimes that is a mistake. And we have a lot of women of color, people in general out here that are incredibly competent, but are not able to articulate with confidence. And that gets them passed over a lot of times. So a big driver for me is to help that confidence rise to the surface while we're building up the competency level.
I tell my friends, we have this saying like, what is your superpower and stuff like that. For me, it's confidence.
Yeah.
My superpower is confident.
Yes.
I'm just super confident. How do you build that up in other people?
Sometimes it is a matter of, this manifests itself in different ways, but what it comes down to is I see you and you can do this. Or I saw this very unique thing about you. You could take that and do this thing with it. Because for me as an individual looking at myself, I don't know what stands out. I don't know what's different. I don't know what's enough because I'm me and I've seen myself this way every single day and it appears to be normal. But if someone comes to me and says, I really love the way you blah, 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 it's like, And I learned a while back that I needed to start asking those questions. Why do you enjoy working with me? What is it about me that when we have this very specific thing we have to do makes you want to ping me to do it with you? And gathering those nuggets helps build your confidence. but also doing and failing helps build your confidence, right? So having a safe space for women to fail, they tried it. You're not as scared to try it the second time because now you know what to expect, right? And the more you do it, the more confident you become in your success. So it's a matter of doing and encouraging and lifting each other up at the same time.
That right there is powerful, because like people always tell me, like, you know, you're confident, how can I do it? I'm like, you could fake it till you make it. You can put yourself in these power positions that, you know, I like reading these studies that say put your hands on your hips, stand up, or put your hands on your head and lean back. But for me, I think just being born in the Bronx, and you got to have some sort of swagger. And I think my dad always gave me that swagger, always had fresh kicks. Like he taught me, look, you can't leave your house without your shirt being ironed, ever. You got to have white, crispy Nikes. And this is like my dad. If you, I wish one of these days I'll have a picture and bring it up there. But the way he presents himself, the way he takes pictures, it's just and confidence. You see it, and I think that rubbed off on me growing up, and having him as not only my dad, my mentor, someone that I still call, and he still like tries to stunt on me. He does. He pulls out like his fresh gear when I go to Puerto Rico, and you know, I think, you know, you can build confidence. I also think you can fake it till you make it. Like, even if you're not confident, you could just be like, I am, because your brain doesn't know the difference when you're lying to it.
Absolutely.
What is next for you?
I don't know, man. I just wake up every day trying to be a better version of myself than I was the day before, trying to make an impact on the industry and change a life. So wherever that leads me is where I go. I always say if I never get another promotion, never earn an additional dollar in my life, I consider myself a success, because, you know, I come from really humble beginnings. All I ever really wanted to do was make a difference and be able to support my family while I was doing it. And I'm there. So I'm not really looking around the corner and looking out for this top exec role. I just personally like to feel like I'm making a difference. And as long as I'm doing that, I'm good.
That's amazing. Any last words for the listeners?
Don't be afraid to try to do the things you want to do. You know, you're not guaranteed success if you try, but you are guaranteed failure if you don't. So don't be afraid to step out there and just try something new.
How can they reach you?
Career in cybersecurity.
How can they reach you out there on social media?
So I'm Yatia or Tia Hopkins on LinkedIn. My personal website is tiahopkins.com. My Twitter game is not great, but I'm working on it. I'm at @yhopkins on Twitter, and the org is empowercyber.org.
Well, thank you so much. I greatly appreciate it. Until next time, thank you guys for joining.